I don't think it's the government's job to go in there and say, you need this, you don't need that. It's the government's job to say, this is X amount of money, and we're going to protect the people, and you're going to have to figure out how to get by on what's left.
Got clutter piling up? FM Junket in Carson, Iowa is your hometown cleanup crew. Fast hauling, fair prices, and now easy dumpster rentals for DIY cleanouts. Your single items to full-on messes, FM Junket gets it done. Call today and breathe a little easier. Prom season is coming fast, and Inspire Couture in Glenwood has the dress that feels like you. From sleek and modern to bold and unforgettable, every gown is handpicked to help you shine. Find your perfect fit, feel confident, and make prom night one to remember. Only at Inspire Couture. In Mills County and beyond, home is about people, and Ruby Realty is proud to be part of this community. Whether it's residential, commercial, their team brings local knowledge and genuine care to every step. Ruby Realty is rooted right here and serving neighbors just like you. Built in 1917 and once one of the oldest Ford dealerships in the country, the Ford building in Malvern has been fully remodeled into a modern multi-use space. It has apartments, business suites, and office space for rent. It blends big city style with the charm of small town living. A historic landmark ready for today's dreamers and doers.
Certainly appreciate you all taking time to come tonight to meet a fellow I have a lot of faith in, Mr. Brad Sherman. If you haven't met him personally, I think Kerry ran out the door before you could shake his hand, but it's another local boy right here that works in Council Bluffs. Keith, I'm sorry. Brad also put together a book in his time in the legislature that is free to you. It's very interesting, and I'm sure if you wanted some more of them, he could furnish them. Brad Sherman is an individual that I met 4 years ago, heard him speak in the conflict about the Summit Carbon Pipeline, which I've been a part of, as you know, because, as I pointed out to you, it would have gone north and south. The easements are right a mile east of Emerson here in Montgomery County. Just to give you, Brad's never been to Emerson, so you got to kind of bear with him. And he's never been to Emogene or Strand. I know. It's just not enough time. But he's a very interesting person, and if you shook his hands, you definitely know that he hasn't sat behind a desk very long. He's had some successes and failures like the rest of us. The lines in his face tell me one thing, that he is an honest man, and he will tell you the truth if you ask him the question. I hope you ask him questions now. I'm going to turn it over to him. We're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. It was requested we do that. If you'll remove your cover and stand with me. Pledge allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, the next governor and first lady of the state of Iowa, Mr. Brad Sherman.
Thank you, Tom. Well, Tom mentioned this book. I do want to point out that we do have plenty of copies of this. Actually, I didn't write this when I was in the legislature. I wrote this probably 12, 14 years ago. This was an effort to educate people on the founding principles of our nation, the things that our freedoms rest on. And it was a quiz that we started doing, and we surveyed 135 people in our county fair and on these questions, and almost identical questions. And then if you scored that result like a test, the average score was 26%. Now you can read the questions and you can take the quiz yourself and you can tell us, how you feel, but yeah.
I forgot one thing. Some of the people that aren't here tonight were afraid that they would have to make a check contribution to Brad's campaign. And I told them that it was completely on me. Just come. However, I have to tell you that the cookies are $50 a piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
The cook, no. You know who the cook is.
Yeah.
No.
All right.
No.
Thanks, Tom. So anyway, pick one of these up. This is just an effort. So we thought this was a good thing, addition to our campaign. So we put a new cover on it, called it Campaign Edition, and that's why it's out there. But anyway, I just wanted you to know that. First, I guess I will tell you a little bit about myself and where I came from and how we got to this point, and then we'll hit a few issues, and then I want to have some questions. I love answering questions because many times when we answer questions, we get into the deeper issues that we don't get time to talk about, you know, when you're just doing a standard stump speech. And then a lot of times there are questions that come up that I don't know that much about, so I learn things. And so that's one of the most important things I think about campaigning. This tonight is, I think, 310 meetings we've done since we started this campaign. So we really believe in the grassroots, and that's an important part of campaigning. But I'll just start with saying that I grew up in Southeast Missouri. We moved to Iowa in 1981, started a church. But my wife and I met on August 15th, 1974, the same night I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ. And I emphasize the word surrender. It wasn't just a political or a religious experience, or political for that matter, but come on in. But that night changed my life. And my wife and I got married then 5 months later because her dad wouldn't let us get married sooner. And so we've been walking together ever since. I always tell people she's my secret weapon. She's doing an amazing job in this campaign, and she's an amazing mother as well. We have 4 children, 13 grandchildren. 2 sons. One son served I have 2 sons, both served in the military. One is an Iraq War veteran who was a medic dragging wounded soldiers off the street in Baghdad in 2005. So very proud of him and his service there. And then my youngest son is a captain in the Air Force. He's serving in Des Moines right now, and he works in cybersecurity. He's actually in Ohio right now doing some training. And then we have 2 daughters in the middle. Our youngest daughter is in Iowa City. She helps us with a church. I still pastor a church there when I'm there, at least. And then she helps a lot with that. And then our other daughter is watching tonight from heaven. She passed away unexpectedly in 2023. And that's a big reason of why I didn't run for state house again, was because we made plans to move to the district where those grandkids live. She had 4 children, has 4 children. And so Carol was going up there and helping with their schooling and everything like that. So it was in that process that we made a decision to not to run again. And then we started thinking about what's next. And people said, well, you should run for governor. And we prayed about it, and God started making things so clear. I can tell you, in 50 years of walking with the Lord, I've never been more confident of hearing God's direction about anything than I have about this. So for me, this is a calling. This is not just a career move. I don't want another career. I don't need another career, you know. So anyway, that's the bottom line on that. But I grew up, like I said, my dad had in an area where my dad had an excavating business, and I grew up operating dozers and drag lines, and we, we're always repairing and fixing our equipment and that sort of thing. And we did a lot of farm drainage work. We dug ditches. A lot of the work we did, we built a lot of farm ponds and things like that, but a lot of it was ditch digging and cleaning out existing ditches, because you know how the ditches are. They get filled up, the brush grows in them and the silt fills in. And before you know it, your field becomes a swamp. So if you don't keep the ditches cleaned out, the field becomes a swamp. So I like to let people know that I literally have swamp draining experience. And I plan on bringing that into government as well, because this whole idea of keeping a ditch open is kind of like government transparency. You know, if we can get our government transparent and everybody can see what's going on, a lot of problems will get fixed pretty quickly. So I'm really a big advocate for transparency in government. So I was working as a heavy equipment mechanic when I went into ministry training. And then after ministry training, we moved to Iowa City. 1981, we started a church. That's, like I was saying, that's when we saw the indoctrination that was taking place in young people's lives. They come in there believing in God and loving America. They go away atheists, questioning whether America is a legitimate nation. All this kind of garbage just goes on, all kinds of wokeism that was going on the campuses. And so we knew then that our foundations of our freedom. We're being undermined, and we're going to have to do something about it. That's, so I got involved doing different things. I helped with presidential campaigns. I've in that whole process, that little booklet came out of that, a desire to help educate people about things, about our foundations of freedom. Like I said, I've helped with presidential campaigns. I got involved in party politics. I've been a county chair. I've organized the caucuses and been to all the conventions, all the way to the national level, and served on the National Platform Committee, et cetera. During those 45 years of pastoring, I've also, besides the broad experience you get from working with people from every walk of life and helping them through all the different things that people go through in that period of time, I've also done some home building and real estate development. My son and I built the home we live in now, and then I built several other homes that we've lived in as just a part of making ends meet. Because when you're ministering to college students, you don't have a whole lot of they don't have a lot of money to help you out with, in college students. So come on in, folks. And
It costs $50 if you're late.
yeah.
On that $50 deal, Brad.
All right, good deal. So anyway, we did a lot of things on the side, making ends meet. Building homes was one of them, but did some real estate development. And then I've also helped start pro-life organizations. I was a co-founder and board chair of Informed Choice Medical Clinics, which we had 5 or 6 clinics around the state doing pro-life medical work. And these were medical clinics that offered real medical services, limited, but real medical services, particularly 4D ultrasound, et cetera. We had doctors that came in and volunteered to be overseers and what have you. So anyway, that's a big part of what we did. So I'm just telling you this to say I have a broad range of experience, and I think this is something that I bring to this race that the other candidates in this primary don't bring. So there's lots more that we could talk about, but that's the short picture of it. So one of the things I'm going to do this different tonight. I'm going to read you a list. I've got a bullet point list of issues that I believe in. I probably won't get to all of them. I'll hit some of them, but at least you'll know this is how I'm thinking. And these are important things. Maybe it'll spark something that you'll want to ask a question about later. But here's the basic bullet point list, and that is this, that I know and I realize that we're in a war. I'm not talking about necessarily the war over in Iran right now. I'm talking about an ideological war to preserve the freedoms and the principles that we find in our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence, et cetera. So, and I think we got to wake up. There's a wake-up call, and that's part of what I feel like my responsibility is to wake people up to what's really going on. So we're in a war with socialism and indoctrination like that, We've been fighting that for more than 4 decades. I think we're in a war with an Islamic invasion. These people, this is not a religious issue anymore. They're coming here wanting to overthrow our Constitution and establish Sharia law. That's not a religious issue anymore. That's a political issue. And it shakes a lot of people up when you start talking that way, but these people have been doing this for 1,400 years, and they're doing it to other nations, and we've got places in our country right now. So I said I was just going to give you a bullet point list, but here I am talking about it. Okay, anyway. We're in an open war with evil. We got Satan worshiping groups who want to make it normal in our culture. We've got human trafficking, big problem in Iowa. We've got high property taxes, and we got property rights being violated. We got to restore election integrity. I've been hearing that a lot on the trail too. It's still an issue with people, even today. We need a chain of custody. We need mail-in voting. We need to eliminate mail-in voting unless it's absolutely necessary, for certain people. Only citizens should get to vote, and we need to get rid of these machines that are out there. I think we still have some we're using in our state as well. We got to reform our educational system. We need to replace Common Core with common sense, and get rid of some of those woke ideologies that are still hanging around in some of our schools. And we need to replace this globalist mentality with a pro-America, patriotic type teaching that produces citizens for our country, not people that hate our country. And we got to identify what's the cause of the high cancer rates we have in Iowa. We got to restore family farms and grow the food that we eat. I think would be a good move toward. Encourage families, and families are the foundation of our culture. We need to fix our property tax issue. It's huge. And I will stand for medical freedom I will also continue to stand for Second Amendment rights. I'm a hobby gunsmith, so I like to do that sort of thing. Continue to stand for life, and I can promise you I will not be bought, and that government's not for sale. So those are just some of the issues I believe in. So let me just get to a few principles. The Declaration of Independence says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And I like to pause at created. All men are created equal. And they're endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. And that among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Even in that word just is a very important principle, that it can't be just any powers, it's the just powers. And so there has to be a foundation for what is just and what isn't. But here's the thing that I like to pull out of those few lines, is that rights come from the Creator. Among these rights are life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted. So the purpose of government is to protect the rights that the Creator gives us. There are too many people in government these days that think that government gives people rights. Government doesn't give people rights. Rights come from God because we're created equal in His sight. And so that's just absolutely essential. That principle right there was ingrained in every student's mind in our school systems. That could be transformative alone. So that's one thing. And then there's life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Most of the issues we're dealing with in our culture have to do with one of those issues. Pursuit of happiness is primarily about property. The founders believed that you had not the right to property, but the right to pursue it. Or not the right to happiness, but the right to pursue it. And the right to work and enjoy the fruit of your labors and own property. There's other places in our Constitution that actually says life, liberty, property. The Fifth Amendment, for example. So these are important things. And so property rights is a big one. So I already mentioned property taxes. This is something that I think if we could get transparency in government, and I'll say I'm advocating for a new person for auditor. That's somebody that we know personally, who's from our county, who has exposed and stopped corruption in our county as a county supervisor. That's Abigail Moss. I don't know if you guys have heard of her, but I know her personally, and I will vouch for her as being somebody who will do the job. And she's got some great ideas. I'm not going to get into all the details, but I would encourage you to hear her ideas about what being the state auditor. Because if we had a real state auditor, we wouldn't even need Doge, would we? Because that's what the auditor is supposed to do. So she's got some real ideas to fix that. So I think transparency in government is a big one. There's some other things we can do on property taxes, maybe talk about that in detail more later. Another issue that has to do with property is the issue of this carbon capture pipeline. Some of us have already been talking about it tonight here in this room. I think it's this simple. A private company who's not a common carrier for a product that's not a public utility should never get to use eminent domain, ever. It's just that simple, because property rights it's one of those fundamental rights. And so now I know there's times when eminent domain has to be used and nobody likes it, but it's just a fact. But it has to be for the public good. This is not for public good. And there's a lot of reasons behind it. So this is a private company that wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for the tax credits that come from the IRS, the 45Q tax credits. They wouldn't even be interested in this. They don't care about the environment. It's not about saving the environment. I had a top scientist from one of our state universities tell me, and he said it quietly because he was afraid somebody might hear him. He said, there's nothing humans can do to produce enough CO2 to hurt our atmosphere. He said, but I can't say that, or I would lose my job. Now that shouldn't be happening in a free country, that you lose your job because you have a different opinion. But that's what's going on. I went to a conference out in Denver in 2023, and there we learned from other top scientists who had recently retired, so they weren't afraid about losing their jobs. And so they were saying that, and one of the things we learned was that the CO2 levels in our atmosphere are at about 420 parts per million. The optimum levels for plant growth is between 400 and 1,200 parts per million. So folks, CO2 is not a problem. If you want to capture CO2, plant a tree. That captures CO2 really well. So this is not really about saving the environment. And I believe in saving our environment as much as anybody. We got clean water issues. We got, pollution. All these things are important. clean air and clean water is really important, but CO2 is not the problem. It's a scam designed to make a few people very rich. And everywhere I go, when I say CO2 is not a problem, I see people nodding because everybody knows it. But we've been conditioned. We've been conditioned to we don't want to say that. We might look like a radical. Well, I tell you, we need to get radical because we're being taken over by some radicals who are going to take our freedoms away and our nation if we don't do something about it. So, and I don't think we have to be radical as far as crazy. We just have to be able to speak the truth. There's a quote that I usually save to the end of my presentation, but I'll just stick it in right here. It's by Orwell, and he said, at least they tell me it's by Orwell. But I like the quote. I don't care who said it. I like the quote. But he says, in a world filled with lies and deceit, speaking the truth is a revolutionary act. And that's what we have to do, is just speak the truth. And when we start speaking the truth, it's something about truth that just witnesses in people's hearts. So this is really important stuff. So anyway, that's all about property, pursuit of happiness. If you go to the liberty issue, I mean, what happened during COVID was a trampling of our liberties. It's unthinkable when you look back on it. I'm not going to be too critical because I know there was a lot of fear and we didn't know what was going on. And we were told a bunch of stuff during that, but it didn't take too long to figure it out. And so what happened during COVID is it crippled our economy. Businesses were shut down. People's livelihoods were hurt. In fact, people lost their lives because of a one-size-fits-all protocol coming down from Anthony Fauci. Doctors were not even allowed to try something they thought would work or they might lose their license. The Iowa Board of Medicine threatened many people's licenses here in Iowa because they questioned whether, can I prescribe ivermectin, for instance, or something else. I mean, that shouldn't be happening. My son-in-law is a physician. That my daughter who died, her husband is a physician. And before she died, they told him that you have to take this shot, and it's not even a real vaccine because it doesn't meet the requirements by definition. So you have to take this shot before September, this was in the summer, or you're going to lose your job as a physician at the hospital. And he said, well, I'm not taking the shot. And he's a doctor. I'm not taking the shot, and I'm not quitting, and you're going to have to escort me out on the last day. And guess what? They found an exemption, because somebody stood up to them. And so that's what we have to start doing. We have to start being bold and standing up to things that we know. Now, I know there's times when we need to be careful, and I don't think of myself as just running off saying things off the cuff. But when the evidence is out there, it's okay to question it and speak the truth at times, okay? That's how we learn things, is because we ask questions and we don't hide in the corner when, oh, well, what if I lose my job? So I just wanted to bring that out when it comes to the whole COVID issue. That was a trampling of our liberty. And one of the things that really bothers me is that when it was all over, I heard people stand up and say, oh, well, we kept Iowa open. It's like, no, we didn't. We didn't keep Iowa open. We shut Iowa down, and the declaration of emergency got extended multiple times. And when I was in the legislature, Sandy Salmon in the Senate filed a bill, and I filed a companion bill in the House that would reduce the powers of the governor to declare emergencies to one declaration of emergency, lasts for 60 days. After that, you have to go to the legislature if you want to extend it. And I think that's common sense. I understand that we need the ability to declare an emergency quickly when certain things happen, that we don't have time to go gather a bunch of people and consult about it. But that's a one-time deal. And after 60 days, there's been plenty of time to get more heads together, come up with the best way to proceed. If that declaration of emergency needs to be extended with things like shutdowns, then we can get some people to agree on it. So I think that's very important. And so I would be happy to sign that bill as governor. In fact, it didn't get much traction when I was in the House, but right now I hear that bill is moving through the House, and they've tweaked it just a little bit, but it's going through the House right now. So I like to think I had a little bit to do with that. So, but anyway, that's important. So, and then when it comes to liberty, Iowa it's been reported that Iowa is third in the nation, or second or third in the nation. Third, okay, my wife remembers better. Third in the nation when it comes to human trafficking per capita. Third per capita. And a lot of people are not aware of this, but people are becoming more and more aware, and that's a big issue. We've got 65 agents in our state overseeing gaming at the casinos, but only 2 working with human trafficking. And this is a big deal, and it's a much bigger problem than most people realize. And my friend in the State House, Mark Thompson, and there's a Mark Thompson here, where are you at? Yeah. I got a friend in the State House named Mark Thompson as well, and he filed a bill to increase the penalty for human trafficking from a Class D felony to a Class A felony, and I was happy to vote for that and sign on to that bill as well. So that's just one little step, and he's got more. He's leading the charge on this right now in the legislature to establish a task force to really go after this and fix this problem. This is something that's got to be fixed. It's just modern day slavery, and that's not liberty. You know, that's what this is. If you've ever been to some of the presentations about it, you'll understand what I mean when I say it's modern day slavery, and it's really what it is. Some of these traffickers literally put chips in these girls that they traffic, so they know where they're at. They track, and if you ever see a young lady carrying 2 phones, that's a bad sign, because the one belongs to their trafficker, usually. So there's a lot of issues there. Anyway, I don't want to get too deeply into that.
Got clutter piling up? FM Junket in Carson, Iowa is your hometown cleanup crew. Fast hauling, fair prices, and now easy dumpster rentals for DIY cleanouts. Your single items to full-on messes, FM Junket gets it done. Call today and breathe a little easier. Prom season is coming fast, and Inspire Couture in Glenwood has the dress that feels like you. From sleek and modern to bold and unforgettable, every gown is handpicked to help you shine. Find your perfect fit, feel confident, and make prom night one to remember. Only at Inspire Couture. In Mills County and beyond, home is about people. And Ruby Realty is proud to be part of this community. Whether it's residential, commercial, their team brings local knowledge and genuine care to every step. Ruby Realty is rooted right here and serving neighbors just like you. Built in 1917 and once one of the oldest Ford dealerships in the country, the Ford building in Malvern has been fully remodeled into a modern multi-use space. It has apartments, business suites, and office space for rent. It blends big city style with the charm of small town living. A historic landmark ready for today's dreamers and doers.
The next one is life. Now, liberty and the pursuit of happiness doesn't mean much if we're dead. So life has to be the foundational thing. We have to respect life. And I've already talked about my pro-life work. I think the heartbeat bill was good. I was happy to vote for that bill in the House, and now we have a prohibition against abortion, surgical abortions before 6 weeks. But I knew at the time that bill had a lot of loopholes in it, and it's not good. I believe life begins at conception, and we need to protect life from conception to natural death. Life is sacred before God, and this is something we need to work on. Right now, surgical abortions are down because of the heartbeat bill, but we have no way of measuring how many abortions are taking place chemically through the pills that are being mailed into Iowa. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that still, and I certainly will be on board with getting that fixed. And then, of course, life is more than preborn. It goes all the way to the end of life, natural death, to conception to natural death. Life should be respected. And I've heard a lot of issues, more than I like to hear, about things that need to change in nursing homes, things like this. So there are a lot of things that we can do to really show more respect for life. And then, of course, in the middle of this whole life process, we've got, the high cancer rates. We've got mental health issues in our state that need to be addressed. And so there's a lot more detail on that. I just want to really focus a minute on education and then give you 4 quick promises that I've been making around the state. Education is really how we're going to fix, a big part of how we're going to fix these problems. We have to, and it's a long-term thing. It's not just something, I wish you could get elected and flip a switch and fix everything. You know, it doesn't work that way. I don't think anybody really expects it to work that way, although some people act like they do. You know, maybe there are a few things you can do quickly. But in general, I don't believe in executive orders. I mean, there might be 1 or 2 that need to be done. But that wasn't the way our government was designed. You know, we're supposed to make laws and live by them. But George Mason, who's known as the father of the Bill of Rights, he said, if free people do not examine their liberties and how they were obtained, they risk losing these rights. And so my paraphrase of that is that if we don't know how government is supposed to work, then we won't know when it's not working. And then our freedoms could be taken, and by the time we figure out they've been taken away, it's too late. And that's been happening gradually over the decades. And so government just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And Thomas Jefferson said, I know of no safe depositor of the ultimate powers of a society but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise that control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. And this is the true corrective for abuse of constitutional power. And so there's a lot in that quote, but first off, Jefferson also said, inform the whole mass of the people they're the only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty. So there's only one place to store our liberties and make them secure. It's in the people. It's in us, in you guys. And we do that by informing them of how our government's supposed to work. And when people are informed of that, they're going to protect it. That's the only safe depositor for the ultimate powers of a society. But what if they are unenlightened and they don't know how to exercise that power? Then what do? Well, government likes to say, well, let us trust us. We'll fix it. Well, that's the scariest word you could ever hear, isn't it? You know, I'm from the government, trust me. You know, or like Reagan said, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. It's like, oh man, scary words, you know. But it's the people. The people, informed people will elect the right kind of people, you know, to go and exercise what needs to be done in government. But if they're not informed, they won't know how to do that. And so we have to inform people. And that's where we teach people how to do the right thing. You know, as Republicans, most of us are Republicans, I guess, in this room, we believe in smaller government. That's what we say all the time, right? And I do believe in that, and we do believe in it. But because people won't do the right thing on their own, what do? We pass a bill for this, we pass a bill for that, we fix this, we fix that, and government just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Why is it? Because people are not self-governing. This nation was founded on something called self-government. It's because as a pastor, a Christian pastor, I would call it having the law of God written on our hearts. That's a scriptural version. If you want to look at it from a natural sense, you could just call it being trained to do the right thing. If people do the right thing, then we don't need more laws and more laws to corral them in and make them do the right thing or prevent them from doing the wrong thing. So what we have to do is we need to get this educational system back to training people to do the right thing, understanding our government, seeing the logical reasons why it's important. And I believe that our nation is founded on Christian principles. I'm not going to be ashamed to say that. It's in our documents. It's there. It's a fact. Anybody that can't see that is not being honest or hasn't studied the right material or something. Now, do I want to force people to become Christian? Absolutely not. But there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with having the 10 Commandments on the wall in the school or on the yard in front of the courthouse or even praying in school. But no, we don't want to force anybody to be Christian. Here's the thing though, but somebody's values will shape public policy. That's just a fact. It's going to happen. Neutrality is a myth. If we sat down and be quiet, somebody else, that's just us sitting down while somebody else advances their values. But what if we were able to convince everybody just to be neutral and not try to advance, if that was a thing? I don't think it's possible, but what if we could get people to say, okay, I won't push my values in government, we'll just be neutral. Well, then just by doing that, we're promoting a certain value system, and that's called atheism. That's what we're doing. So somebody's values are going to shape public policy. And somebody asked me this question once. They said, do you think your values are better than the others? I said, well, yeah, of course. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be pushing those values, right? It's not an arrogant statement, it's just what I believe. And I believe Christian values provide the most freedom for everybody, regardless of whether they ever become a Christian or not. And so somebody's values has to shape public policy, and I'm not going to be afraid to say that, because that's what this nation was founded on. It's in our Declaration of Independence that I just quoted to you about the Creator. It's in the Iowa Constitution that says we owe gratitude to the Supreme Being for the blessings we've hitherto enjoyed, and we feel dependence upon Him for future blessings. It's in the Constitution, where it's signed at the end in the year of our Lord, a reference to Jesus Christ. And Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3 is based on Isaiah 33:22. The Lord is our judge, our lawgiver, and our king. The judge represents Article 3, the judiciary branch. A lawgiver represents Article 1, the legislative branch. The king represents the executive branch in Article 2 of our Constitution. So our whole nation is based on these issues. So we got to get back to these foundational principles and stop being afraid to do so. So these are important issues to me. And so here's my 4 promises. First promise, If I make a mistake, I'm going to admit it. Have to admit it. Don't try to gaslight me, and say, oh, we kept Iowa open. No, we should say, no, COVID was a mistake. And we're not going to let that happen again. I can guarantee you as governor, we're not going to let that happen again. Because, it's the only time in history I'm aware of that we quarantined healthy people. It's the only time in history we told doctors, you can't try out something that you think might help. It's the only time in history that kind of tyranny has to end. So that's important. And Mike Huckabee, I told him, he's a friend of mine, and I helped with his campaign when he ran for president. And I told him I was going to run for governor. And he said something that really stuck with me. He said, and we were talking about governing, and he knows a thing or two about that. And he said, the most dangerous person in the room is the guy that doesn't know that he doesn't know. Only Mike says it that way. He's just really good at that. And that's what we nobody knows everything. You have to admit when you're wrong. And, when somebody stands up and says, listen, I can govern from day one, and there's no learning curve for me. Well, let me tell you, folks, that's a very dangerous statement. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about, but I'll move on. Anyway, then there's the second promise, and that is, and I know I can keep this one, that is that I won't please everyone. Most people chuckle. It's like, yeah, that goes without saying, right? But what I'm talking about is the fact that I know what my core principles are, and I know in advance I'm not going to change those principles. So when those get challenged, sorry, I'm not going to please you. So I know that in advance. And obviously there's room to learn a lot of things, but some core principles, you have to know what they are and know that in advance. Otherwise, you're going to get compromised right off the bat. And then the third promise is I will not be bought. Government is not for sale. And, there's too many backroom deals made by big donors who think that now government owes them favors. There's one very wealthy individual I heard about. It was reported to me, and I don't know the name, and I didn't hear it, so I can't put a name to it. But this person was asked if they might run for governor someday. This person's response was, as reported to me, no, I'm not going to run for governor because it's easier to buy a governor than run for governor. Man. Unfortunately, we all know that attitude exists, but there's somebody that just flat said it, apparently thought it was being said in private, but it got out. And that's what's not going to happen. Now, when we decided to run, and my wife and I prayed together and we decided this was where God was leading us, it's a calling. We didn't ask any big donors. We didn't ask any big political players. We asked one person, and that was God. And I know he said do it. Now, a lot of people have got on board with this, and some key people have gotten behind us. And I think they're behind us for the right reasons because they believe in somebody who just simply believes in doing the right thing. And it's not about favors. I'm the only guy that got in this race before Governor Reynolds got out of the race. I called her in 2024 and told her I was going to run. And that's not to trash her. We did it because of God's calling, and I just wanted, out of respect for her, I wanted to tell her. Now, I do disagree with some of her positions very strongly, but that wasn't the point at that point. I just felt like I owed it to her. I have a relationship with her, and I felt like I owed it to her to just be honest and say, I don't want you to hear this from a rumor. I just want you to hear it from me. We feel like God said do this, so that's what I'm going to do. And so after that, then her campaign guy called my campaign guy and said, are you ready to rumble? They were raising money, what have you, So she was planning to run for a while there. But then we kicked off our campaign in February of 25. And then in April 25, she announced that she would not be running again for governor. And so when she did that, it made me look like I knew what I was doing, So, but nevertheless, the point I'm making is that I'm the only guy that got in this race when Governor Reynolds was still running. And I'm willing to challenge what many people consider to be the status quo. Again, not trying to trash her, but many people consider a lot of establishment issues out there, and they're fed up with the establishment. And so I'm not looking for a career. I'm not a career-seeking opportunist. That was just a fact. Everybody else in this primary got in the race after she said she wasn't going to run. Okay, so anyway, that's my third promise. I won't be bought. Government's not for sale. The fourth promise is that I'm going to seek Almighty God with all my heart through prayer and wise counselors, because nobody has the corner on hearing from God. We need wise counselors. And so to make those decisions, because there are so many things that happen in government, You know, as I said, I've been up there, I've had a good look under the hood, and I can tell you, sometimes it's not as simple up as it looks from out here in wherever we're at, you know? And I didn't mean that.
2 hours away
We're,
from Boeing.
we're in Emerson. I know we're in Emerson.
I'm going to make you a sign that says Emerson with a target on it.
But I will admit, sometimes I don't know where I'm at. Been 310 meetings, but what I meant was, no matter where we're at, you know, we're out here at a distance from Des Moines, and we hear about a bill, and somebody voted against it, and there's one part of the bill that says this, and we go, why did they vote against that? Well, maybe we don't know that there's another part of the bill that says this, and it's a very bad poison pill in the bill, and so we don't get the whole story. And sometimes these things get very convoluted and twisted into this legal language. And I tell you, it takes wisdom, and we need God's help, you know, when you're doing that stuff. So that's why I say I'm going to seek Almighty God through prayer and wise counselor, because it's not always as clear and black and white as it looks. So anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, as I say. So, but anyway, again, we have, in that conversation I had with Mike Huckabee, he said something else. He was talking about why it is that people like President Trump. And he said, it's like this. He says, you walk out here in farm country in Iowa someplace, and of course, Mike's been all around Iowa. You know, he ran for the presidency twice. And he said, you walk into a little cafe, and there's 4 farmers sitting around a table, nursing a cup of coffee, and they're all laughing and having a good time. And then they lean in close to one another, and they say something, whisper it, and then they lean back and nod their heads. You guys can see the picture clearly. And he said, what they just said in private, Trump says out loud. And that's why people like President Trump, because they know what he's thinking. Now, you may not agree with it. You know, you may not like the way he says it sometimes. Sometimes it makes you cringe. But I'll tell you, at least you know pretty much what this guy's thinking. And I think that's where we get back to that original quote. In a world filled with lies and deceit, speaking the truth is a revolutionary act. We can create a revolution in our government if we will simply stand up and speak the truth and just be honest and not play the game and try to win favors, you know, with money and that sort of thing. So that pretty much is the end. I just want to say one thing. Go ahead.
I just wondered if you would disclose to these folks your personal comment when your daughter passed about President Trump.
Oh, yeah. I don't always share that, but then don't let me forget, I want to tell you about beating Rob Sand, okay? Okay.
How could I forget that?
But yeah, when our daughter passed away, we were at the funeral home up in Algona making arrangements. My phone rang. I didn't know who the number was, so I didn't answer it. Plus, we were busy. When I got time, I listened to the voicemail, and it was a voicemail from President Trump. He knew my daughter's name, how old she was, how many kids she had, and offered them one of the most sincere condolences I've heard. And so I thought, well, you know, I'm going to call this number back. So I went back to the house. So maybe somebody will connect me. I would like the opportunity to just say thank you for doing this in person. So I called the number back, and he picked up. It was his cell number. And he offered the same condolence, and we had a good conversation. He says, if there's anything I can do to help, let me know, what have you. And so anyway, I texted him the obituary link to my daughter. He read it. He texted back, said, I showed this to Melania, and she cried. And so that's just a little side note on President Trump that I think I saw a side of him that a lot of people don't get to see. But side note.
Thanks.
But
Stands alive.
yeah. And by the way, on Trump, I'm the only guy in this race that actually endorsed him. A lot of people like to talk about how they support Trump and they're MAGA people and all that, and that's fine. I'm glad they do now. But I endorsed him in 24. I was the first guy in the legislature in 24 because I was the first guy the state chairman asked. I mean, it's not like any big badge on my chest. I'm just saying, he came to me first and asked me if I would endorse President Trump. I said, absolutely, I will. And I'll tell you what went through my mind, lots of reasons, but one was, how can you say you support election integrity if you won't support the guy who had the election stolen from him? You can't just sweep that under the rug. You can't do that. And so I did support President Trump in 2024. One of the big issues that keeps coming up is who can beat Rob Sand? And I've been around the state, and one of the things I've noticed is a frustration with what people call the establishment. Now, all of them have different definitions of establishment. There's different issues that frustrate them. But I've heard people talk about staying home, other people talking about voting for Rob Sand maybe this time because he's a pretty slick talker and he's pretending to be in the middle, but he's really got some very, very left-wing ideas and his baggage won't be that difficult to unpack. But nevertheless, but here's what we have to avoid in November. We have to avoid people staying home and getting frustrated and quitting. This is a red state. It's a conservative state. And it'll stay that way if our people turn out. So we got to turn out our people. So there's a lot we can do about that. We really need to all pitch in the best we can to get our friends and neighbors to turn out. But those people staying home is a problem. So I believe we need to convince them that whoever's running for governor is not somebody who will just be status quo, who will just be a continuation of the establishment, or who will be controlled by the establishment. And so I think I'm the person that proved that I'm that person because I'm the only person that got in the race when the incumbent had not yet decided she would step out. And so anyway, I just think that's a powerful point. And so I am ready to challenge Rob Sand. He is, have any of you seen the video where they asked him how many genders there are? Any of you seen that video? You know, I mean, they asked him the question, and he gave this really weird laugh, kind of gave me the creeps. And then he had dodged the question and kept going. Then they brought him back to it. He dodged it again. Then they brought him back to it on the third try. He finally said, well, I think there's two, but if there's more. And so whatever that dance was, when they asked him that question, he started dancing. I don't know what that dance is called, but it was a pretty good jig. But see, here's a guy who you could see the wheels turning in his head. He knew that he couldn't say two because it's going to offend his left-wing base. But he also knew the right answer, or what was the middle wanted to hear, the people he's trying to appeal to. And so this guy is, you know, he's just shifting sand, and we can't build our house on the sand in Iowa. So just wanted to put that out there. So I will stop there. If you guys have questions, I will be happy to take a stab at them. So
Go ahead and fill your refreshments. The cookies haven't decreased in value, but we got to eat them. So get a cup of coffee and let Brad take a breath here.
I'm good, and whatever you guys want to do.
We
But
got to wait for the Burlington, though.
oh, okay.
New auditor, what else do you have in mind to improve transparency in state government?
Well, let me expound first on this auditor thing. Abby Moss's vision, and I've heard her share it many times, is to establish a statewide software system. Auditing right now in our system, all the different entities have various software systems and they don't communicate with one another. So it takes a lot of manpower to go out and do an audit. And because they have to go in, they have to hire firms to do it, a lot of manpower, and it becomes very expensive and it's long drawn out. So it takes sometimes 2 to 3 years to get the results back from an audit, and by that time it's irrelevant. And so that's an issue. And and we have the technology these days to do that. It shouldn't be that hard. In fact, you could probably tell AI to write your program and it would do it for you. You know, so we can get this done. And that we could.
Where are we encountering the most resistance to that?
What's that?
Where are we encountering the most resistance to that?
I don't know at this point. Right now, she's just talking the ideas, but there will be some. And I can tell you some stories about how we even got Rob Sand in the first place that have to do with corruption. But nevertheless, I think that's a big deal. If we had that software system, it would flag problems. The public could go online and see exactly where the money is being spent and who spent it, who authorized it. And then they would have, their discretion would be informed to be able to vote those people out and put honest people in. You know, I heard about, just auditing the school systems, for instance. I heard about one. I know we've got some good school districts that do a great job and they just manage their money well. But there's others, like one I heard about, where the superintendent has a $400 a month clothing budget. Or another superintendent makes $400,000 a year. And all kinds of extra staff and administrative staff that doesn't need to be there. So, these things are going on. If the public could see this stuff, it would change things. Now, as far as property taxes, that's transparency. On property tax, one of the ideas that I've been knocking around, I think it's doable, is that when people hit age 65, if you've lived in the state for 10 years, then your primary residence should be tax-free, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to work most of your life, pay off a mortgage, and then you have to rent your house from the government. You know, and I've run into a lot of people who are on fixed incomes, and they're going to have to sell their home because they can't afford their property taxes anymore. And so I think if people lived here, if you had to live in here 10 or 15 years before, then it would cause people to, first off, to plan in advance to be in Iowa. Then they would plan on staying in Iowa instead of moving to Florida or Arizona, because there's a benefit to staying here. And then their families then might stay around them as well. So that could help, and I think it would help, stop any population from leaving Iowa. And that's a big issue that we need to deal with in Iowa, is keeping people to stay here. And so that would keep a lot of our people here in the state. So, and then of course, that would increase, the more people, if our population grows, that increases tax revenue, so it makes it possible to even pay for the program by itself. I don't know how, but you know, the loss of revenue in the beginning of that would have to be replaced somehow, unless we found enough cuts to fix it. I don't know, but it would be a big cut in revenue, so we'd have to do something on that. But that's one idea I've been floating around, and I've been hearing other people in the legislature talk about similar things as well. So that's one thing I've been talking about. And there's some other plans out there, but it's not an easy issue, because we do have public services that we have to provide for, and that property taxes is one of the main ways for fixing that, you know, paying for schools and everything else.